For 10 years I planned my sister's birthdays, and my family always ignored mine. This year, I made my choice. Stay with me while I tell you this story, and if it connects with your heart, I'd be so grateful if you could show some support by liking, sharing, or subscribing. My name is Hannah. I'm 20 years old now, but for as long as I can remember, my life has revolved around my younger sister. She's 18, the golden child of our family. Our parents, Linda and Mark, always seemed to see the sun rise and set on her. Me. I was just there in the background, the reliable daughter who handled things but rarely got noticed. Every year, without fail, I organized Julia's birthday parties. I picked the themes, baked the cakes, decorated the living room, and made sure all her friends had a great time. I used to tell myself it didn't matter that my own birthday was often forgotten because at least someone in the house was smiling. But deep inside, I always felt the sting. Julia's birthdays were legendary. I remember her 8th birthday. Our parents rented a big hall, filled it with balloons, hired a clown, and even brought in a cotton candy machine. She ran around squealing, soaking up all the attention. That same year, my birthday had been combined with a random family barbecue. I didn't even get a cake with my name on it. They just stuck a candle into a pie and sang half-heartedly before moving on to play cards. It became a pattern. Julia's parties always had themes: princess castles, beach parties, karaoke nights. Mine? If they remembered at all, it was a small card from my mom or a "maybe we'll do something next weekend" from my dad. Sometimes nothing at all. I'd sit in my room, scrolling through photos of Julia's celebrations, wondering why I wasn't worth the same effort. By the time I was 15, I stopped asking for anything. It hurt less to pretend I didn't care. But I did care. I cared when friends asked what I did for my birthday, and I had to lie. I cared when I saw pictures of Julia blowing out candles on a 3-tier cake, surrounded by everyone I loved, while my own day passed quietly like it didn't matter. Still, I kept helping. I told myself maybe if I worked harder, if I showed my parents I was dependable, they'd finally notice me. But the truth was they didn't. Julia was always praised for being pretty, outgoing, special. I was the helper, the one in charge of cleaning up afterward. Even though I smiled and played along, the forgotten birthdays stayed with me. Each year added another layer to the quiet ache inside me. I grew used to being brushed aside, but the bitterness never fully went away. I just buried it, waiting, wondering if one day I'd get the chance to be seen. On the morning of my 20th birthday, I woke up with a strange kind of hope in my chest. I told myself not to expect anything, but deep down, a small part of me thought maybe this year would be different. Maybe my parents had finally noticed how often they forgot. Maybe they'd at least surprise me with a little cake or even just a card. I got dressed and walked into the kitchen, trying not to look too eager. But the table was empty. No balloons, no cake, not even a simple happy birthday. Instead, I found my parents and Julia huddled together, whispering and laughing like they were keeping some exciting secret. I stood there quietly for a moment before realizing what I was hearing. They were planning Julia's 18th birthday bash. My mom was going on about the color scheme and the catering. My dad was talking about renting out the country club ballroom. Julia squealed when she heard the words, "live band." They were so wrapped up in the conversation that they didn't even notice me standing there. That was the exact moment it hit me. They had forgotten my birthday completely. Not only forgotten, but they were spending it plotting the perfect party for Julia. No cake, no hugs, not even a quick happy birthday hand. Just silence, like my day didn't even exist. I felt my chest tighten. I wanted to say something, to shout, "Hey, remember me? The daughter who's turning 20 today." But the words stuck in my throat. I just turned away and walked back to my room, my eyes burning. Later that afternoon, Ethan came over. He had remembered, of course. He always remembered. He showed up with a small chocolate cake and a single candle, smiling like he could fix the emptiness in my... He hugged me tight and whispered, "Happy birthday, Hannah. You deserve so much more than that." I tried to smile for him, but inside something shifted. Sitting there, eating cake with Ethan while my family laughed in the other room about Julia's party plans, I realized I couldn't take it anymore. It wasn't just about this one birthday. It was about every forgotten year. Every time I sat in the shadows while Julia got the spotlight. It was about being treated like I didn't matter in my own family. And now, watching them gush over Julia's 18th while pretending my day didn't exist, I knew I was done. That night, as Ethan held my hand, I made a silent promise to myself. Julia's 18th birthday, the one they were all so excited about, would not go the way they expected. For once, I would be the one in control. For once, they would see the pain they'd caused. It wasn't about revenge for the sake of being cruel. It was about finally standing up for myself. I didn't know exactly how yet, but I swore her big day would be remembered for reasons my family would never forget. From the outside, I looked like the same old Hannah, dependable, organized, the sister who could always be trusted to handle the details. When Julia's 18th birthday planning officially began, I volunteered like I always did. My parents were thrilled. Julia just smirked, tossing me a list of things she wanted like I was her personal assistant. I smiled and nodded, hiding the storm brewing inside me. The first step was booking the venue. Julia had dreamed of a big party for months, and my parents wanted it to be perfect. I acted excited as I toured a reception hall, taking photos of the chandeliers and dance floor to send in our family group chat. Everyone praised me for being so responsible. Inside, I almost laughed. If only they knew this wasn't just about Julia's big day anymore. I coordinated catering, too. Julia wanted fancy finger foods and a dessert table, and of course my parents agreed to every request without blinking at the cost. I confirmed menus, arranged schedules, and sent detailed emails like I'd done 100 times before. Each thank you from my mom for being so reliable felt hollow. It was like they still didn't see me, only what I could do for Julia. But this time, while I played the role of helpful daughter, I was also working on something else. At night, when everyone thought I was just finishing homework, I sat at my desk sorting through years of proof. Old text messages from my parents promising, "We'll celebrate your birthday next weekend," and never following through. Receipts showing hundreds spent on Julia's parties and nothing on mine. Photos of Julia grinning behind giant cakes while I sat alone with a single candle stuck in a cupcake. I kept it all, organized in folders, ready for the moment when truth would finally come to light. Ethan noticed how much time I was spending on my secret project. One evening, he sat across from me at the kitchen table, frowning as he watched me scan old photos into my laptop. "Hannah," he said softly, "are you sure about this? It feels heavy, like you're carrying the weight of all those years again." I looked up at him, my voice steady. "I'm not carrying it anymore. I'm finally putting it down. They've ignored me long enough. This isn't just about Julia's birthday. It's about every time they made me feel invisible. They need to see it." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I could see the conflict in his eyes. He didn't like the idea of me stirring up a storm, but he also knew how deep the scars went. After a long silence, he reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "If this is what you need to do, then I'm with you. I'll help." In that moment, I knew the plan wasn't just mine anymore. I wasn't alone this time. Together, Ethan and I would make sure Julia's big night turned into something none of them could ever ignore again. The week of Julia's 18th birthday arrived, and everything looked perfect, at least on the surface. I had poured myself into the planning, just like every year before. The venue shimmered with twinkling lights and elegant decorations. Tables were lined with white cloths, centerpieces of fresh flowers, and trays of food so carefully arranged they looked like something out of a magazine. From the outside, it seemed like I had done what I always did, given Julia the party of her dreams. Family members began to arrive, dressed in their best clothes, smiling and chatting about how wonderful Julia's celebration looked. My aunts hugged me and said, "You really outdid yourself again, Hannah. Julia is lucky to have you." I smiled politely, thanking them, while inside I thought, lucky isn't the word I'd use. The guest list was long. Relatives came from out of town, family friends filled the hall, and Julia's classmates crowded around her like bees to honey. She basked in the attention, flipping her hair, laughing loudly, and soaking up every compliment like she deserved all of it. I stayed busy, making sure the servers were ready and the DJ had the playlist lined up. But underneath my calm, collected exterior, I held on to my secret. One of the biggest parts of the evening was the slideshow. Everyone believed it was a highlight reel of Julia's life. Baby pictures, family vacations, milestones that showed off how special she was. I had set up the projector myself, nodding along when Julia bragged to her friends. "Just wait until you see it." Hannah put it together, of course. "She knows I'm the star of the family." Her words stung, but I kept my face straight, nodding like a loyal sister. Julia strutted through the room in her new designer dress, gifted by our parents. She giggled when relatives told her she was beautiful, replying with, "I know, Mom and Dad always say I'm their little angel." At one point, I overheard her say to her best friend, "Honestly, I don't know what Hannah would even do without me. I mean, she's good at planning things, but I'm the reason people even show up." She laughed, and her friend laughed with her. I clenched my jaw but didn't say a word. This was exactly why I had to go through with it. The arrogance, the entitlement, the way she assumed my only purpose was to make her shine. It all fueled me. As the evening went on, I moved quietly around the hall, checking details, pretending everything was normal. Nobody suspected a thing. To them, I was just Hannah, the responsible older sister, making sure Julia's night was flawless. They didn't know that behind my polite smile and careful planning, I was biding my time. Because the truth was, Julia's party wasn't just hers anymore. It was mine too. And when the moment came, the spotlight would shift in a way none of them were prepared for. The music faded into the background as the night reached its peak. Guests had eaten, danced, and laughed, and everyone was waiting for the slideshow Julia had been bragging about all. She stood near the front with her friends, grinning from ear to ear, ready to soak up more attention. I picked up the microphone, my hands steady though my heart pounded in my chest. "Can I have everyone's attention for just a moment?" I said with a smile that felt sharper than it looked. The room quieted. "Before we play the slideshow, I'd like to give a quick toast to my sister, Julia. 18 is a big milestone, and she deserves to be celebrated." Polite applause rippled through the crowd. Julia beamed, tossing her hair, certain that more praise was coming. I turned to the projector, clicking the remote. The lights dimmed, and the first image appeared on the screen. It wasn't Julia's baby picture. It wasn't her 12th birthday at the bowling alley, or her sweet 16 with the pink balloons. It was me, 10 years old, sitting alone at the kitchen table with a single cupcake. The candle was crooked, and the smile on my face was small, almost forced. A murmur spread through the crowd. Julia's grin faltered. The next slide came. Julia at 8 years old, standing in front of a 3-tier cake with 30 kids cheering around her. The contrast was impossible to miss. Then more images. Me again at 14, sitting in my room with a cupcake from the grocery store. No one else in the photo. Then Julia at 14, surrounded by friends in a decorated backyard with banners that read "Happy Birthday, Princess." Gasps echoed. A few relatives exchanged looks. I could hear the whispers starting. I kept clicking. Screenshots of text messages appeared. One from Mom. "Sorry, sweetheart. We'll do something next weekend, I promise." Another from Dad. "Let's just celebrate with Julia's party this year. Easier for everyone." Julia rushed forward, her face red. "Stop it. This isn't funny," she shouted, reaching for the laptop. I held the microphone closer and turned my body to block her. "No, Julia," I said firmly. "It's not funny. It never was." The room went silent again. My voice wavered at first, but the more I spoke, the stronger it grew. "For 10 years, I planned your birthday. I decorated, I invited people, I made sure everything was perfect for you. And in all that time, mine didn't matter. My birthdays were forgotten, brushed aside, or shoved into the corner of your celebrations. Year after year, I sat there invisible, wondering why I wasn't enough for my own parents." I took a breath, my eyes sweeping across the stunned faces of relatives and family friends. Tonight, everyone was expecting another slideshow to show Julia's life. But I needed you all to see mine, the part of the family story no one talks about. Julia stomped her foot like a child, but the whispers grew louder. For once, the spotlight was no longer hers. It was mine, and I wasn't letting it go. For a long moment after I finished speaking, the room was completely silent. The slideshow froze on one last photo of me at 16, sitting by myself with a candle on a store-bought muffin. The contrast between that and Julia's glittering parties was undeniable. You could feel the air change. Relatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A few turned their eyes directly toward my parents, Linda and Mark. My Aunt Karen's lips tightened as she whispered something to my uncle, who gave a small nod. Family friends leaned closer to one another, murmuring questions. The weight of their stares fell heavy on my parents, who sat stiffly at their table. Then Julia's voice broke through the quiet. "You ruined my day," she shrieked, her face flushed crimson. She stomped her heel against the floor, glaring at me like I had committed a crime. "This was supposed to be about me. You're just jealous because nobody cares about your stupid birthday." Her words echoed, sharp and ugly, and I didn't even need to answer. She had just proven everything I said was true. A ripple of disapproval spread through the room, relatives exchanging knowing looks, a few even shaking their heads. From the crowd, someone muttered, "She always did get everything handed to her," another whispered. I wondered why Hannah never had parties. The whispers grew louder, like a tide turning against Julia and, more importantly, against our parents. Linda suddenly stood, her voice trembling but defensive. "This isn't fair. We did our best. Hannah never asked for big parties. She didn't care about that stuff. Julia was just different." Her excuse sounded thin, even to her own ears. Uncle David leaned forward, his voice cutting. "Not caring? Or not being given the choice? We've all been to Julia's celebrations for years. I can't recall a single one for Hannah." The room buzzed with agreement. Linda's face paled and Mark fumbled to add, "It wasn't intentional. Life got busy." But no one seemed convinced. The evidence had been laid out in black and white on the screen, and the murmurs around the hall told me no one was buying their excuses. Julia, meanwhile, kept screaming, "Stop looking at me like that. This is my party. Hannah, you're pathetic for trying to steal my moment." She tried to shove me, but before she could get close, a steady hand rested on my shoulder. Ethan had stepped up beside me, tall and calm, his presence grounding me. "She's not stealing anything," he said firmly, his voice carrying enough weight that a few people clapped lightly in agreement. "She's finally speaking the truth." I glanced up at him, feeling strength flood back into me. For the first time in years, I wasn't standing alone in front of my family's judgment. With Ethan by my side and the eyes of the entire room watching, I knew my parents couldn't twist the story anymore. The truth was out, and nothing they said could erase it. When the last of the whispers swelled into the room, I knew I didn't need to say anything else. The truth was already hanging in the air, impossible to deny. My parents sat frozen. Julia was still stomping and yelling, but I felt strangely calm. For the first time in my life, I had said everything I had been holding in. I didn't wait for an apology. I didn't expect one either. I set the microphone down on the table, the sound of it clinking softly against the wood. Julia's shrill voice followed me as I walked toward the doors. "Don't you dare leave. You ruined everything." Everyone was supposed to be looking at me. Her tantrum echoed through the hall, but I didn't turn back. Ethan's hand slipped into mine, firm and reassuring, guiding me out while the room buzzed with unsettled murmurs. The cool night air hit my face the moment we stepped outside. It felt sharp and clean after the heavy tension inside. For a second, I just stood there breathing it in, my chest rising and falling, as if I was learning how to breathe for the first time. Relief washed over me, but it was tangled with heartbreak. I had finally spoken, finally shown everyone what it was like to be the invisible daughter. Yet part of me still ached that it had come to this, that I had needed to expose my own family just to be seen. Ethan squeezed my hand gently, his voice low. "You did it, Hannah. You don't ever have to carry that alone again." I nodded, my throat too tight to answer. It wasn't victory I felt exactly. It was freedom. A heavy weight I had carried for years had finally loosened its grip. Later that night, after Ethan drove me home, my phone buzzed with messages. A couple of my cousins had reached out. One text read, "I always wondered why your birthdays were never a big deal. I'm sorry I didn't say anything." Another cousin wrote, "We saw it, Hannah. We just didn't know what to do. But I'm glad you spoke up." Their words brought tears to my eyes. For so long, I thought I had been completely alone in noticing the unfairness. To know that others had seen it too, even if they stayed silent, made me feel a little less invisible. I curled up in bed that night, staring at the ceiling. I knew my parents wouldn't change. They had built their world around Julia being the star, and nothing I said would undo years of favoritism. But it no longer mattered. I had finally broken the silence that had smothered me for so long. For once, I didn't feel like the forgotten daughter. I felt like someone who had taken her voice back. And no matter what came next, that was enough. 3 days passed before my parents finally called me. I had half expected silence, maybe even a cold shoulder, but when my phone lit up with Mom's name, I knew the storm was coming. I answered anyway, bracing myself. Her voice came sharp and angry before I could even say hello. "Hannah, how could you do that to us? Do you realize the humiliation you caused? Everyone was staring at us like we were monsters. You ruined Julia's special day." I held the phone tighter, my pulse steady. "No, Mom," I said quietly. "I didn't ruin Julia's day. You did. You ruined every one of my birthdays for the last 10 years. I just showed the truth." There was a pause, and then Dad's voice cut in, rough and defensive. "You didn't have to air family business in front of everyone. That was cruel. We looked terrible in front of the whole family. You embarrassed us, Hannah." I let out a bitter laugh. "Embarrassed you? Imagine how it felt to sit alone on my birthdays while Julia got parties worth thousands of dollars. Imagine blowing out a candle on a muffin while my little sister had halls full of people cheering for her. You didn't think that was cruel? I didn't embarrass you. I exposed what you did." Mom snapped back. "That's not fair. You always made it seem like you didn't care about parties. You never complained." I felt my throat tighten, but I didn't let my voice waver. I didn't complain because I knew it wouldn't matter. I swallowed it year after year because I wanted to believe maybe someday you'd see me without me begging for scraps. But you never did. They didn't reply. All I could hear was their heavy breathing, the sound of people cornered with no excuse left. Finally, Dad muttered, "Well, you've made your point, but you tore this family apart." And then the line went dead. Meanwhile, Julia was busy spinning her own story online. She posted a string of pictures of herself scowling at the party with captions like, "My birthday was ruined, and some people can't stand seeing others happy." At first, a few friends offered sympathy, but then the whispers from the party started circulating. People began commenting things like, "Not everything is about you, Julia, and maybe your sister deserved her moment." One even wrote, "If what I heard is true, you had this coming." Julia deleted comments and tried to defend herself, but the tide had turned. The more she whined, the more people seemed to pull away from her. Ethan sat beside me one evening while I scrolled through the mess on my phone. He wrapped his arm around my shoulders and said gently, "You don't have to keep watching this. You've said your piece. You don't owe them anything anymore." I leaned into him, feeling the weight of his words settle over me. He was right. My parents weren't going to change, and Julia would always find a way to play the victim. The only choice left for me was to stop waiting for them to value me and start building a life where I was already valued. After the phone call with my parents, I knew something inside me had shifted for good. I no longer waited for their approval or begged for scraps of attention. Instead, I started to quietly step back. I stopped answering every message right away. I didn't drop everything when my mom asked for favors. I let Julia's endless complaints about her ruined birthday go unanswered. It wasn't anger that kept me away. It was peace. For the first time, I was choosing myself. With Ethan's encouragement, I poured my energy into things that made me feel alive. I focused on my classes, spending more time at the library, actually enjoying the work I was doing instead of worrying about whether my parents noticed my efforts. I also picked up more shifts at the cafe, where I worked part-time. The extra money wasn't much, but it felt good to be independent, to know I was building something of my own outside of my family's shadow. Ethan was a constant source of strength. On days when the old ache returned, when I caught myself wondering what if my parents finally cared, he reminded me that I didn't need to keep chasing love that wasn't freely given. You have people who see you, he'd say. Start leaning into that. So, for the first time in my life, I planned a birthday celebration, not for Julia, but for myself. My 21st was still months away, but I didn't want to wait another year to feel like I mattered. So I picked a weekend and called it my real birthday party, the one I had always wished for. I invited only the people who truly cared about me: Ethan, a few close friends from work, 2 cousins who had messaged me after Julia's party. They all said yes without hesitation. On the night of the party, my tiny apartment was filled with laughter and the smell of pizza. There were balloons taped to the walls, a homemade banner that read Happy Hannah, and a cake with my name written in bright blue frosting. When they turned off the lights and everyone sang Happy Birthday, just for me, I couldn't stop smiling. For once, the song wasn't rushed or half-hearted. Every word felt real. I blew out the candles and looked around the room. People were clapping, cheering, hugging me. There was no Julia demanding the spotlight, no parents brushing me aside. It was just me, seen and celebrated, surrounded by people who actually wanted to be there. For the first time, I felt alive. Not invisible, not forgotten. Just Hannah, important, respected, and loved in the way I had always dreamed of. That night, as we ate cake and laughed until our stomachs hurt, I realized something. I didn't need my parents' approval anymore. I already had a family, one I had chosen, one that chose me back. And that was worth more than any party Julia ever had. Julia's graduation was just around the corner when the message popped up on my phone. It was her, of course, trying to sound casual but laced with her usual entitlement. Hey, you're good at this stuff. Can you start planning my graduation party? You know how stressed I am. For a long time, those words would have triggered something automatic in me. I would have sighed, rolled up my sleeves, and started making lists, because that's who I'd always been, the girl who handled everything while being overlooked herself. But this time, I just stared at the message, my chest tight but steady. I typed back a simple answer. No. It didn't take long before my phone started ringing. My mom's name lit up the screen, and I already knew what she was going to say before I picked up. Hannah, don't be difficult, Linda scolded, her voice sharp. This is a big moment for your sister. You've always been so responsible. Just do this one thing. I almost laughed at the irony. This one thing? After years of doing everything for Julia while being treated like I didn't matter, now it was suddenly just one thing. My father joined in soon after, trying to guilt-trip me. Family helps each other, Hannah. Don't be selfish. But I wasn't that girl anymore. Calmly, I said, if you want a party for Julia, you can plan it yourselves. I'm done being the forgotten daughter. I'm done pretending it doesn't hurt. You made sure Julia got everything, and you left me with nothing. So this time, you'll handle it without me. There was silence on the other end. My mom sputtered, trying to defend herself, while my dad muttered something about me being ungrateful. But I didn't waver. My voice was steady, stronger than I'd ever heard it. I'm not asking for apologies anymore. I'm just telling you, I'm done. Then I hung up. The fallout came quickly. Julia sulked, posting passive-aggressive updates online about how some people don't care about family. Relatives whispered about the scene at her birthday, and now this. How obvious it was that favoritism had poisoned everything. My parents scrambled, calling vendors, asking for help from others, and for once, they had to carry the burden themselves. I didn't lift a finger. And you know what? The world didn't fall apart. The only thing that crumbled was the illusion that I owed them my silence and service forever. Walking away, I felt lighter than I ever had before. My greatest revenge wasn't embarrassing Julia in front of everyone, though that had cracked their perfect image. My true revenge was refusing to play my old role ever again. I wasn't the forgotten daughter anymore. I was Hannah, proud, independent, and free. And nothing could take that away from me now. Do you believe Hannah made the right choice by stepping away from her family, Or should she have given them another chance? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd really like to hear your perspective. And if you enjoy stories like this one, make sure to hit subscribe and tap the notification bell so you'll always be the first to know when a new story is posted.